Hi everyone and welcome to Fresh from My Garden. You may have previously seen a few videos on passion fruit care and also on passion fruit tasting. But today's video is on how to grow these beautiful plants from seed. So we have a few plants in our garden, few that have been purchased from the nursery and a few that have grown from seed. So in today's video I'm sharing how to save the seeds from your passion fruits or from passion fruits that you buy from the grocery store, and those seeds can be saved and planted to grow new plants in your garden. The very first time that we grew passion fruits in our garden, it was a really long wait to see flowering and fruits on our passion fruit vines. We saw the vines that were growing really wild, but there was no sign of fruits or flowers. But once the fruiting began, then there were so many fruits that we had lots to share with friends and neighbors. In spite of sharing a lot with friends and neighbors, we also had excess fruit, a few of which we sold at our nearby grocery store and some that we ate at home. But there were so many fruits that some of them got spoiled and then we randomly threw them into our garden. And from that, we got a lot of new plants that we shared with some of our friends. In our passion fruit care video, I have shared a view of some of the plants from my friend's garden that I had shared with her, and those were completely grown from seed and they started producing in a year or two, and they have a lot of passion fruits growing on them. So, these beautiful tropical plants can be grown either from stem cuttings or from seeds. And though the growth from seed will be a little longer and it will take a little more extra time for these plants to produce fruit, the wait is really worth it because once it starts growing, it really grows wild and it has a lot of beautiful foliage and flowers and also a lot of fruit. And since these plants are tropical plants, they require a lot of sunlight and warmth, and they also grow well in places with a lot of humidity. We also need to keep in mind that this plant is very invasive and it takes up a lot of space. So, whenever we are growing this plant, it's better to have a trellis or a space where these plants can climb onto and expand itself and grow well, because it doesn't do well in limited spaces. It would just take over whatever space it gets and take over many other plants in the garden. I have previously shared a few videos on passion fruit care, passion fruit tasting, and also how to control overgrown passion fruit plants. So, we've had a lot of overgrown passion fruit plants in our garden, and they are not very easy to control once they have taken up all that space. So, it is better to keep them in check or keep them in control before they are overgrown and take up a lot of space that we don't want it to get onto. So please do take a look at those videos, and once you get to know more about these beautiful plants and these delicious and nutritious fruits, you will definitely want to grow them in your garden. After a few years of growth, the performance of this plant starts diminishing, and then it is better to grow new plants from seed or from stem cuttings. So, here I have a passion fruit from our garden which I'm going to use to grow new plants for our garden. You can cut up this fruit and then I'm going to scoop out this pulp. So there is a lot of pulp and there are lots of seeds. So I'm not going to use all of these seeds to plant today. This is a really delicious and a fruit rich in vitamin C. So I'm just going to scoop up some of them and eat it and use the rest of the seeds to plant today. So this fruit is a little tart and a little sweet, but it is really delicious and it's also very nutritious. So I'm going to empty the rest of the pulp into this strainer because the pulp can be a little slimy, and as you try to wash the seeds from the pulp, they can just slip off your fingers and they can just go down the drain. So I'm just going to add them all into this strainer and wash it out so that I get all the pulp off the seeds before I plant them. You can also store these seeds for later. They can be dried and stored for later. But today, I'm not going to dry these seeds and I'm going to plant them directly into the soil. So now here I have some of the seeds that I have washed and cleaned and removed maximum pulp that I can, and I'm going to sow them in a container. This is a small container in which I have a mix of some potty mix and cocoa peat and vermicompost. So it's a very crumbly soil with good drainage. So I'm going to plant all these seeds into this container. And a few weeks after germination, once the seedlings have grown well and they are big enough for transplant, they can be transplanted into bigger containers or into the ground. These seeds are a little sticky and they're sticking to my fingers, and I'm not able to plant them giving them enough spacing because they do have a little bit of pulp on them and the seeds are also wet. But it's okay, and it's okay to plant them right away. I'm going to just plant them here and cover them up with a little bit more cocoa peat. Just take care not to let the soil dry out completely and keep them moist during the germination and the initial sapling period so that these seedlings or seeds don't dry out. So now here I have a tray that I had planted earlier. So these are also seeds that I saved from some passion fruits that we harvested from our garden. I sowed 10 seeds and almost all of them germinated well, but over the last few days I haven't seen much growth. And this is a really shallow tray, so it looks like these plants are really root bound and they need to be transplanted so that they can grow well. So here you can see that the roots have developed really well, and I'm going to just carefully transplant all of these seedlings into a container which has a little more depth. And once the leaves have started to get more bigger and they are the plant is also taller, then I will be transplanting them into the ground or into bigger containers. Passion fruit is a plant that has a deep root system and it requires a large container, or it needs to be planted into the ground so that it can grow well and produce lots of flowers and fruits. So we have a few passion fruit plants that are planted directly in the ground, and some of them are in big buckets. So these buckets are around 25 liters big and they are quite deep, and they have enough space for these root system to go down and for these plants to develop well. So after I transplant these seedlings, I'm going to place them in a spot with some semi shade so that the plants don't go through that transplantation shock and continue to grow and get bigger. Also, don't forget to water your plants immediately after transplant to reduce the amount of transplantation shock for any kind of seedlings or saplings. You can also check my other passion fruit videos to know more care tips on growing this plant and how to get a lot of fruits from this plant. So, we have been growing these plants in our garden for a few years now, and we do have at least 6 to 7 plants in our garden in both containers and also in the ground. I'll also share an update a few days after the transplant to show you how well these plants are continuing to survive. And since it is the winter season, the growth is pretty slow and the real growth picks up during the summer. So, I hope you liked today's video on passion fruit growing from seed. And if you are watching our channel regularly, please don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts about our videos in the comment section below. I make sure I reply to all of them. A big thank you to all my supporters, viewers, and subscribers. Have a happy and wonderful new year.